Welcome to the Daily Dawg podcast for Game Week 2, Monday, September 1st. Game Week 2 means Game Week 1 is in the books, which is glorious. It means that college football is back. We had a game to watch on Saturday, lots of great games out there, an unusually great weekend. I think 3 different matchups of top 10 teams out there. Our Georgia Bulldogs were not one of those teams drawing a lot of interest and a lot of people watching heavily. Marshall was not a team that was going to move the needle a lot for what people are going to think about Georgia. But as fans, we had a good time. Fans came in and packed in Sanford Stadium for at least the first quarter and a half. Obviously, people started pouring out before halftime. And while the temperature was very pleasant, it was still a very hot day out there and not a super compelling opponent. So a lot of people started taking advantage of doing other activities. I'm sure they kept up with the game either on radio or TV and were locked into every moment. What we get to do now, though, for the first time this year, is break down the game. We set up some of our expectations, what we were looking for and hoping for, even though this is one of those pay games or payday games, as they call them, or cupcake games, however you like to look at it, even though Marshall's not always been considered a traditional cupcake. Either way, this was a game that Georgia was expected to win. Marshall's not the team that you might know them as and have seen them in the past. They have a new coach, new staff. Everybody was transferred, so they were really just getting started. So we knew Georgia was going to win the game. The questions that we had are how are they going to play and what are we going to see from them? So we set out some guidelines of things we wanted to see. So let's go ahead and jump in and break it down and talk about how they accomplished on those things. First of all, let's start with the offense. Everybody is really focused on quarterbacks this year around the nation in college football, and we're certainly interested to see what's happening with Gunner Stockton taking over as the starting quarterback. We see Gunner play, of course, in the second half of the SEC championship game and starting in the playoff, but now we've come through a full practice. Offensive coordinator Mike Bobo presumably has had the opportunity to work closely with Gunner and build the offensive system around what he wants to do. Saturday was our first chance to see that. So what did we see? First of all, I would say that I was very pleased with the way Gunner looked in terms of he looked confident, he looked poised, he did not look like the game was going too fast for him, he didn't look nervous. Again, I think we can assume that the opponent had a lot to do with that, but the team responded well to him. He seemed to be in charge. He looked like the leader on the field, and he was decisive. So we like that. How did he actually play? Passing the ball, he was 14 of 24 for 190 yards and 2 touchdowns. That comes in at a decent QB rating of 99.1, and I will not even dig into those very often. I really don't know or how the QBRs and QB ratings come together, but it's something to look at once in a while and you get some comparisons. So that's not an off-the-chart rating, and the main reason I think that rating is not higher is you're looking at, like a 62% completion percentage, which is okay, and you're looking at, it's actually 58.5% completion percentage. So in honest truth, I really would like to see our quarterbacks, whoever plays quarterback, be 65% or better when it comes to completion percentage. You want to see that kind of accuracy. Below 65%, there's just too many plays that didn't gain yards. So, and efficiency requires plays that gain yards. So 14 of 24 for 190 yards, that's not great on the accuracy. 7.9 yards per play average, also not super exciting. Elite quarterbacks, when you've seen really high level play, I think you see from about 9 yards per play average and up. 9 to 10, 11 is where you really want to see your guys perform, especially when you're playing against lower level opponents. So Gunner was okay to pretty good. On the strong side, no interceptions. Now, if you're watching the game, you saw balls hit the hands of some Marshall players a couple times. There were some balls that were definitely in jeopardy. So it's not always just a matter of, did he throw an interception when you're looking at your quarterback? Sometimes you're also looking for, did he put the ball in harm's way? Same thing with fumbles. You can look at the end of the day and say, oh, we had no turnovers, but if you put the ball on the ground 3 or 4 times, coaches will tell you that's terrible. You're worried about that, even if you recovered them all. So Gunner generally protected the ball pretty well. We weren't really in jeopardy of a lot of fumbles or mishandles. When it comes to the handoffs and the run game, he handled the ball well, never looked in jeopardy of fumbling the ball himself when he did run with it. But just focusing on the aerial performance, he was pretty accurate, but not as accurate as we'd like to see. He threw a couple touchdowns, which was great. No interceptions, which is good. But if we're being honest, there was a couple times the ball was in harm's way. So that's the passing side of it. On the running side, which, you're not always looking at your quarterback, but Gunner Stockton brings that element. And he carried the ball 10 times for 73 yards, a 7.3 yard average, and he had 2 touchdowns rushing. So overall, he had 263 yards of offense. He accounted for 4 touchdowns, 2 passing, and 2 running. And his run performance was very efficient, and he looked spectacular, really, in the run game. And why would I say he looked spectacular? Not just because he gained 73 yards and the 2 touchdowns, but he ran the RPOs really well. When he pulled the ball out of when he faked to the running back or put the ball in the running back's belly and then pulled it back out and kept it, he made good reads. He completely faked out the defense. Most of the time, once he pulled that ball, he was running free for the next 5 or 8 yards untouched, and often gained 10 or 12 yards and scored a touchdown a couple plays, over 10 yards each. So he really ran the RPO beautifully. He understood the concept of the read, when to hold the ball and when to go with the ball, keep the ball for himself. He did a great job with that. And he also, more than once, he displayed some moves. I mean, not just taking off and faking guys out and having an open lane, but there was at least 1 or 2 times where he put a move on somebody. They were not able to tackle him, and that led to gain extra yardage. So very, very good. And then later in the game, he showed some discipline, not running downfield and looking for and seeking the contact, but once he had gained a first down, once he gained yardage that was reasonable for the play, going ahead and sliding. Coaches would probably tell you they'd like him to slide a little early, a little quicker, get down a little sooner, and take a few less hits, especially because does look like they're going to run him. But overall, looked very good. And so when he was in the game, the offense moved well. He had good command of the offense, and the team looked like they were playing sharp and fairly motivated. So I think we could overall say that it was, I don't know how you want to grade it on a scale of 1 to 10 or by grades. I'd give it sort of a B plus performance. An A performance would have been a much higher completion percentage, some more downfield passing. You look at how the passing plays worked out. Zachariah Branch was our leading receiver. He had a touchdown, a long play of 47 yards. He almost had 100 yards receiving, but didn't. He was 3 catches for 95 yards, a sterling 31.7 yard average, and he had the touchdown. Now, he did a lot of that himself. The 47-yard touchdown, as you might remember, was about a 5-yard forward pass, catching him near the sideline out in the flat. He just used his speed, athleticism, and moves to blow past 3 or 4 different defenders that you might have thought had a chance at him and get in the end zone. So that was really a great individual play by him. Didn't really represent a lot of downfield, pushing the ball downfield by Gunner. And that's really a difference. One thing that Carson Beck was really quite good at, and maybe too much so. Carson Beck is good at looking over the middle of the field and pushing the ball downfield. When his time at quarterback, you saw him make a lot of 10, 15, 20, 25-yard throws over the middle with a lot of zip and a lot of accuracy. And we didn't see those kind of plays on Saturday from Gunner. We did see him get the ball downfield deep to Oscar Delp on one play, and it was a little bit of a funny-looking play, a little slow developing, and he kind of rolled out to his right. Oscar ended up sort of backpedaling and waiting for the ball. It was a nice gain, and the crowd went gave appropriate cheers and excitement about seeing a long, deep play, and I think we're all happy to see Oscar Delp get involved and make some big plays. So, but that, outside of that, you look up and down the sheet, you don't see a lot of long plays. The 28-yarder to Oscar Delp and the 47-yarder to Zachariah Branch were the only 2 plays over 25 yards out of the passing game, and one of those was, again, really about a 5-yard pass. So, overall, I think, again, I feel really good about Gunner's effort and what he did out there as far as leadership and just taking over the starting role against the kind of opponent that we saw him against. We'd probably like to see more polish out of the passing game. We'd like to see more downfield plays. So taking a look at some of the things we set out, we said there's some things we wanted to see happen in this game, some sort of goals. wanted to see 550 yards of offense. Against an opponent like this, I think that Georgia should have been able to possess the ball and move up and down the field with the number of possessions they were going to have and have over 500 yards of offense. They came up at 488 yards. So I would say pretty good. They got close to the mark there. Didn't really quite hit the mark. And I think when we go back and look at the game, we'll see that a lot of that was in the second quarter. And by the fourth quarter, you're going to rein it in. You're going to have third, fourth string, second string combination guys in there, especially if you've got a good lead. And we were up at 45-0 at one point, so we're never going to pile on from there. That's just not how Kirby Smart plays it. We're not going to just gun for all the points and yards we can get. So you need to, in a game like this, the offensive team is going to need to get their yards and points by the end of the third quarter most of the time, before, to see what kind of significant yards they can get. So they didn't quite make the mark of getting over 500 yards, 550. Anything over 500, honestly, I would have been happy with. I did set out that I think they needed to display balance, and we needed to see them go over 200 yards rushing and 200 yards passing. So they did do that. And we had 239 yards rushing and 249 yards passing. So I think they were effectively balanced. So that was check on that. And a couple other things I said I'd like to see about 5 different guys get significant carries in the running game. And I was not expecting to see so much running from Gunner Stockton. I mean, I think that's something that we know he brings to the table. We expect him to bring us back to kind of like Stetson Bennett, where he's going to not just take off when a play breaks down, but once in a while he's going to call his own number and make a good play. And I think we're going to see that with Gunner, but I don't know that I thought we would see 10 carries out of Gunner in this game. So Dwight Phillips, Nate Frazier, Chauncey Bowens, Bo Walker, Josh McCray all got 2 or more carries. So they did get a bunch of different guys involved in the running game, and I was glad to see that. My disappointment is, while we did rush for over 200 yards like I talked about, I'm not super excited about how we did it. Again, it was really mostly the Gunner show. Gunner was our leading carrier. He had the second most carries. Nate Frazier had 11. He had 10. He was the leading yard gainer. He gained 73 yards. Again, 7.3 average. He was the leading touchdown scorer on the ground with 2 touchdowns. And he did not have the long run of the day, but he was in the mix. He had a 14-yard carry. Dwight Phillips had an 18-yarder, and Chauncey Bowens had a 21-yarder. Those were our longest carries of the day. So another downside from the running game. In an opponent like this, you might have thought we would see several 20, 25, 30-yard runs. By several, maybe 2 to 5. We didn't have a run go over 21 yards. And nobody really displayed that home run threat or that dynamicism. Dwight Phillips' first touchdown looked pretty dynamic. I will say that. And he only had the yardage to gain on the play, which was less than 20 yards, and then he was in the end zone. So who knows how far that play would have gone. It was well blocked, and he broke free and just went up the seam between the hash marks on the sideline, and possibly he would have gone for 60 yards had there been 60 yards of field left. It did look like that kind of play. But for the most part, we didn't see those kind of plays. And Nate Frazier, who we know is a dynamic back and probably our lead back this year, he had a pretty pedestrian game. 11 carries, 47 yards, a 4.3 yard average, no touchdowns. Didn't, figure in the game heavily. And again, if he played sparingly because of the kind of game it was, and you could say he did a little bit, he was only in for the 11 carries. He was not in as a throwing target. So he didn't play a ton, which is fine and great, but I would have expected a little more dynamicism. I might have thought on the 11 carries, he might have ripped off more like Gunner's numbers, like 60, 70, 80 yards, maybe a touchdown in there and break a long one. So would have liked to have seen that. And other guys that we've heard about or wondered about, I don't think Dwight Phillips was the guy I thought would have 60 carries or being our second leading rusher out there. Between Nate Frazier, Chauncey Bowens, Bo Walker, who we've heard a lot of good things about, and the transfer Josh McCray, I might have thought we'd seen more yards out of those folks. Dwight Phillips was a guy we saw a little bit last year. He looked incredibly fast and shifty, but very undersized. We've had guys like that in the past. You might think of Isaiah McKenzie back in Kirby Smart's early tenure. We've had guys like that, but and often we found good ways to use them to make weapons out of those guys. Again, Isaiah McKenzie was definitely a weapon, and of course he was more of a receiver. But I'm just saying the smaller guys, in a Dwight Phillips that are fast and shifty and hard to find, hard to tackle. We do seem to find a good way to use those. Dwight Phillips didn't get a lot of play out of last year, but he looks bigger. He still looks fast. He looks bigger. He looks a little more dynamic. So definitely a good day for him. So overall, run game, check on getting over 200 yards. Not so great in the other categories. In a game like this, we really would have yes, 44 carries, 239 yards, 5.4 yard average, 3 touchdowns on the ground. That looks great on the stat sheet. But when you dig into it and you say Gunner was your leading carrier, your best back didn't have much of a day, and the other guys you're thinking might come on and create a three-headed monster in that backfield, what we've seen in the past. Think back to some of our most dynamic run teams have sort of had these roles where we have our lead back or our lead A, lead B, and then that third young up-and-comer who cranks out anywhere from 350 to 500 yards in a third string role, but is incredibly dynamic. And, the perfect example of that was DeAndre Swift when he was a freshman, and think back to the SEC championship game against Auburn 2017 when he comes into the game and just ices the game with like a 50, 60-yard run, puts the game up 28-7, and that's just it. He had that kind of, you'd think, oh, well, I'm sure defenses were happy to see Chubb or Sony Michel back then go out of the game, but then all of a sudden you got DeAndre Swift, who's a future high draft pick, NFL guy, and he just comes in and rips off 60-yarders. There's just no rest for the weary when you have that kind of a backfield. And we did not run particularly well last year, so we really want to see, even though this is not a high-level competition game, we want to see the beginnings of a three-headed monster forming in the backfield. That doesn't start with Gunner Stockton being I love seeing Gunner being run. I love having that aspect of our offense back in play, and I'm sure the coaches were happy to show that off a little bit. I'm sure they're happy to have the league know, hey, look, when you're thinking about your blitz schemes, your defensive line setups, when you're thinking about going up against Georgia, you're going to have a quarterback that you have to respect the run. And that almost always slows down a blitz. That almost always gives the team more things to think about when they're playing opposition defense, and it gives you a lot of options. So it can make almost every play more dangerous. And plus, a la Stetson Bennett, there's a lot of plays when you got a guy who knows he can run it and isn't afraid of contact and has that will to get the touchdown, the first down, or keep the drive going. When a play breaks down, he can make that happen. Almost every quarterback will once in a while break free and get a first down. And Carson Beck was, I think, underrated. He kept arguing about his ability to run, and he did. Last year, he got some key first downs running. But I think we do remember how many drives were kept alive when Stetson Bennett was back there, and our offense is always going to be a pro-style offense that is going to seek to be a professional downfield passing. We're going to pass the ball. We're not looking to have a quarterback who's primarily a runner, but when they can surprise the defense, keep them on their heels, lessen the pressure, and give them something else to think about, plus pick up some key yardage on broken plays, that's a huge advantage. And we know Kirby likes that. And so Gunner looks like that guy, and he looked efficient. He looked good. Running game, I think we're going to want to see more out of them down the line. And so overall, we had 76 plays on offense, a 6.42 yard per play average, which is, over the course of a season, a nice average. Against high-level competition, you would say that's outstanding. Against a team like this, you might have thought you would have been more like high 6, 7 yard per play average. These kind of games are the ones where you usually see the team put up a 7-something yard per play average, so that when you're looking down the road somewhere, or you're looking at the stats at the end of the year, and you say, oh, wow, look how these guys did. They ended up with a 6 point whatever yard per play average throughout the season. They kind of stockpiled some bonus points in a season or in a game like this. So just as an example, I'm looking back at the 2023 season, and I'm skipping over the 2024 because, again, 2024, we didn't have the kind of offense that we were looking for. 2023, 2022, 2021, those are more representative of the offense we want to see out there. In those games, our offense, our out for the season averaged, like in 2023, 5.3 yards per carry. But you look at some games where, like against Vanderbilt that year, who was not good and didn't have Diego Pavia yet, and a better defense. They had 7.46 yards per carry. Against Ole Miss that year, when we blew them out 52-17, you had an 8.5, or not, I said per carry, per play. These are just the whole offense per play. You saw, or no, these are actually run. This is the run offense. I apologize. You saw the, long story short, I've gotten off track there with that. So let me just get back to the overall offense and say, I guess what I'm trying to say is you want to see your offense be able to put up a healthy average. Oh, here we go, actually. I'm sorry, and I told you the wrong thing. In 2023, for the season, we averaged 7.26 yards per play. I mean, and I think that's, a lot of people will tell you they're looking at those yards per play these days because just how many yards did you get in the game? Sometimes that's a function of a lot of different things. I mean, it's great to look up and say, look, we put 600 yards of offense up on, Tennessee. That's wonderful. But sometimes how much you did per play is a better indicator. So when you look back at the 2023 season, we had a lightweight opener back then. UT Martin was the first game. That I was using that as a little bit of a standard to talk about what we want to see. Because that 2023 team we thought was quite effective offensively compared to 2024. What did they do in that first game? They put up 559 yards of offense. They averaged 7.99 yards per play. Against Ball State the next week, 6.3 yards per play. Then when they started playing, tougher teams like South Carolina, it was 5.8 yards per play. Auburn, they still managed 6.6. Kentucky, 8.3. A lot of teams, but you got down to Missouri, who had a really good defense that year, 5.92. Against Alabama, 5.35. You're less likely to see 7 and 8 yards of play against elite teams. But so you think when you're playing a team like this, you might see 7 or 8 yards per play. Over the course of a season, 6.5 yards of play is a decent average, but I might have thought they would have done more. Now, what I will say is I like how they did it. Which is to say that one of the things I really wanted to see is them control the game. It's a lot of teams will use these openers to go out there and really just get their team excited. The coaches will want to call up the big plays. Everybody gets fired up. The team loves seeing 70. The team and fans, everybody wants to see 70-yard touchdowns and 70-3 scores. That gets everybody kind of fired up. But the honest truth is you're not gunning the ball downfield like that all the time. You're not going for home runs, or you can't go for home runs day in and day out every play when you're playing against SEC teams and SEC defenses, right? So Georgia, one of the things you've always seen is we don't blow these guys out. Well, it's not just because Kirby, or we don't blow them out in the way like some of these other, you're not going to see 73-3 usually. And the reason for that is because Kirby emphasizes playing the way we play. We play against ourselves, we play against our standard, not against the other team. So you do the same things every week, regardless of who you're playing. This week, it's Marshall. A couple weeks down the road, it's going to be Alabama. So we're going to play the same way. And by doing that, you build that practice, you build that idea into it. So you don't just get the highs of like, hey, look at us ripping off 80-yard plays against Marshall. You play the way you're going to play all throughout the season, so you get used to it, so you execute, so you do it right. So we know we're not going to just have these silly, video game numbers, because that's not how we run our team, even in these games. But what we would like to see is you would like to see a little bit bigger average out of the plays, right? Because you should be explosive. With your talent gap, you should be so much more explosive than these guys. So, but when I say how I like how they did it, so they did. They didn't just score 45 points possessing the ball, in big quick plays in 18 minutes and leave the defense out there all game. In fact, they won the time of possession in the game, which is critical throughout the season. They had the ball over 34 minutes of the game, and that helps the defense out. That's that complementary football you always hear people in Kirby Smart and people around the Georgia program talking about, and that Kirby emphasizes. Your defense has a much better chance to pitch a shutout, to keep the other team in low yardage, to keep the other team in low points if your offense possesses the ball longer. It's great to go out there and just bomb touchdown after touchdown, but again, if you score 50 points in 18 minutes, then that means the other team is going to have the ball for 42 minutes. Your defense is going to be gassed. They're going to play a lot of plays. They're going to be tired. That adds up over the course of a season. And, it just gives the other team a lot more opportunities. So I'm looking at our drives, and in the first quarter, We had 19 plays for 142 yards and 2 touchdowns. In the second quarter, we had 23 plays for 102 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 field goal. So we'll come back to that in a minute. Third quarter, 15 plays, 135 yards, 2 touchdowns. And then the fourth quarter, when we were largely playing nothing but subs deep into the bench, 20 plays for 114 yards and a touchdown. So a consistent effort. They won the time of possession. They did have balance running and passing. I wanted to see 50 points or above. I thought, because again, that's more about the quality of the opponent. They should have maximized their yardage, I think, a little bit more in the plays they ran. They ran a right number of plays, 76 plays, a lot of plays for the offense. That's good. They ran the right number of plays. They ran the right kind of plays. They balanced themselves out, but they didn't quite get as much benefit per play as you might have thought against a team like Marshall, who's essentially completely rebuilding. So that kind of covers the offense, I think. We looked at, I'm just sort of going through here. Oh, well, one other thing that is a little bit of a knock as we look on it. I like looking at how we did on drives and scoring. We had 13 drives. We scored on 7 of those. That's a nice ratio. We started the game out with touchdowns on 3 of 4 drives, so that's good. We like to see that. One thing I did mention going into the game, we really like to have seen us be able to have an excellent third down. The championship teams a few years ago were built heavily on the ability to gain third downs at a high percentage and stop the opponent. Hold opponents to 20-something%, say 28% or less, and gain third down on, say, 47, 48% of the time or more, 45% of the time or more. Last year's team took a step back in that regard. Teams gain better, and we gain less. And yesterday was nice by the defense, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the defense here next. But the defense held Marshall to 20%, 3 of 15 on third down. That's excellent, right where we want to see the team being. But on offense, we were only 6 of 16, or 37.5%. And that's also not an execution level. I wouldn't be happy with that execution against Alabama. I would say that you got to be higher if you want to beat Alabama or LSU or Texas. Those kind of teams, you're going to want to execute at a higher level than that. It's certainly not good enough against Marshall. So when you look at the drives overall, yes, 7 of 13 scoring drives, 6 touchdowns and 1 field goal. That's all very good. 3 of your first 4 drives, very good. We kind of fell apart a little bit in the middle of the second quarter, and I think we all saw that. A lot of people, I guess, were actually, if you were at the stadium, already heading out from heat and just off to something else. Yes, we were up 21-0, but we had back-to-back drives where we punted, 3 plays, minus 4 yards and a punt, and then 4 plays and 13 yards and a punt. And you only possessed the ball about 3 minutes during that time frame. We righted the ship towards the end of the half. We got the ball for a 9-play, 44-yard drive that got stalled out with a penalty and ended in a field goal instead of a touchdown. But it was a decent effort at seeing a little bit of a 2-minute drill. Glad to see that we got points on the board. But there was a big gap there between when we had scored our 3rd touchdown of the day early in the second quarter to kicking a field goal late just before the half. And the offense, against a better team, you don't want to see the offense go dark that early in the game and leave a crack in the door. You're up 21-0 against a good offensive team, some SEC teams. You're going to see teams rally back. If you're up 21-0 and you go that dark in your second quarter, you might find yourself 21-all at the half, not up 24-0. So, or maybe you eke out that field goal and you're still up 24-21, but 24-17, 24-14, whichever. I mean, you get the idea. You go dark like that, where you go 3 and out, a couple in a row, you create an opening for the other team. So that was disappointing. We wouldn't think that there's anything about Marshall that should have kept us from. You're not going to score on every drive, no matter who you're playing. Okay, but there's no reason to think that with a lot of momentum going strong early, in the second quarter, we would just kind of go into a shell and not be able to get it back for a while. They came back after the half, took the opening kickoff, got a touchdown, then a punt, then 2 more touchdowns, and the game was over. And then, you had scrubs in on both sides of the ball. So on defense, held the other team held Marshall to 3.98 yards per play. That's solid. You might have thought they'd done a little better, but overall, Marshall only had 207 yards in the game. Marshall had one first down before the half and one more first down before the fourth quarter. So 2 first downs before they got to the fourth quarter. In the fourth quarter, we obviously were deep into our substitutions, and so was Marshall, and they were looking for something. They got a quarterback in there, the third guy in the game, found a little magic. He went 6 of 7, threw a touchdown, had 100 yards, got them on the board, and they did a lot more in that fourth quarter. So, but overall, defense, solid effort, and holding the other team to 52 plays, our offense having 76 plays. Again, we had a plus 24 in plays. You're going to do well when you run 24 more offensive plays than the other team. So they got the team off the field, held them on third down. We already talked about their third down percentage was only 20%, and we also have already covered the fact that they only had 2 first downs before the fourth quarter. And they had somewhere in the neighborhood of 72, I lost track of it, but it's around 72 to 82 yards total entering the fourth quarter. So the defense looked great. And that was another thing we talked about. An objective we were looking for out of this game is we want to see both lines just be brick walls. We wanted to see the run game bust through the line on offense. We wanted to see Gunner be clean and have plenty of time. We didn't want to see any sacks. That's what we want to see from our offensive line. From the defensive line, same thing. We wanted to see a wall. We let too many teams get runs on us last year, and it changed the way we were used to thinking about Georgia football, teams being able to run against us on any level. Marshall was not able to run against us. So for the game, they only had 78 yards total, 2.5 yard per carry average. Their long run of the day was 11 yards. That was on 31 carries. So they did get the tie. I said that the quarterback threw a touchdown. He did not. He threw the ball to the 1, and then they ran the ball in for a 1-yard touchdown. So the one touchdown that Marshall scored was a rushing touchdown. But overall, and I know the defense will be, the guys on defensive line hang their hat a lot on being able to keep people out of the end zone. So they'll be disappointed they allowed, albeit against third and fourth and beyond teamers. But overall, again, 31 carries, less than 100 yards, 78 yards. Generally speaking, no push from Marshall. They were not able to run up the middle, out to the side, run anywhere. We had 6 tackles for loss. We did not sack them. Their quarterbacks were pretty mobile. We got them under pressure a lot, and we caught guys who maybe, got away from us in the backfield and lunged forward for a yard. So no official sacks. We didn't give up any sacks, but we didn't get any sacks. But we did have 6 tackles for loss. So that was good. So we forced some lost plays. And I think we did it largely. I didn't see us use anything like corner blitzes or fancy disguise blitzes. I think it was mostly just what we talked about. Our front 7, our front 4, just putting their hand on the ground and just saying, this is the line, and we're going to hold the line. So I think there's really not, it's hard to break down the defense more than that. They did a really good job. So, the other thing I would say is, I forgot what the exact slogan that Kirby's been using. People had talked about it. I think it's fire, energy, and passion, something like that. I think they showed it. I think the defense looked committed the whole game. Even the guys deep into the bench in the fourth quarter. And yes, they gave up the touchdown and they gave up, 100 and something yards in the fourth quarter. But they were not just getting gashed play after play. They were creating no gain play, lost yardage play, then a chunk play for a first down. So they even in that, you weren't just seeing Marshall just move down the field every play. They were stacking plays up at the line, and Marshall would get off a throw and get a first down. And then they maybe broke a run, but then we'd get them under pressure and they throw the ball away on the next one. So you didn't see, even in that fourth quarter, you didn't see like Marshall, 8-yard play, 9-yard play, 6-yard play, 5-yard play, just moving the ball down the field. Defense really played with energy and they played well. Again, overmatched opponent, team that's completely rebuilding offensively. None of the people that played quarterback last year are with the team. So we weren't expecting Marshall to do a lot, but we have seen letdowns. We have seen the defense not play with as much energy last year and let some teams, after we got up to a big lead, we let them get some points on the board. And the overall numbers and stats didn't look like what you might want to see. So let's take a look at, I want to call out a few people who stood out just across the board, both offensively and defensively, people who are who stood out or noticed. I don't think we have like an MVP or want to go too deep into that kind of thing, but people who I think everybody noticed and got our attention were noteworthy. Gunner Stockton, we already talked about that. Dwight Phillips, also, we talked about him. I mentioned Zachariah Branch, but, he was fantastic. I mean, just as advertised, right? He looked great on kick returns. He had about 24 yards on punt returns, on 3 punt returns. He had 95 yards receiving. He displayed an incredible amount of athleticism. He was solid on the punt returns and just instilled confidence that he was going to be able to do something. There was one punt that got over his head, and I don't remember why exactly. It ended up bouncing behind him. I don't remember if that was a bad choice or what. It just surprised him, whichever, but he got away from it. It bounced, so it wouldn't have been a turnover, and I think that's good, where you have one of those balls that bounces off somebody and then it turns into a turnover. He got away from it, but then he looked around and he saw the space as the ball was rolling backwards towards our goal line. He swooped in, picked it up, and gained a few yards, got back some of the yards that had bounced back. You don't always want to see a guy pick up a ball like that because sometimes that leads to a turnover, but it was incredibly athletic, along with the long touchdown he had on offense. One person you might not have noticed, it was talked about a lot this summer, the transfer portal, that we got Zachariah Branch, but also came with him, his brother Zion Branch. Zion Branch ends up being the leading tackler in this game with 7 solo tackles. So congratulations to Zion Branch. I'll have to tell you, that's a box score thing that I noticed. I didn't necessarily see during the game, like, wow, look at Zion Branch out there killing it. But overall, we have to feel really good about the idea that Zion Branch was out there, came along with his brother and was much less talked about, although many people who knew said, hey, this guy's a good player. He's going to make a difference. And sure enough, he was out there making a difference. 7 tackles. The D-line in general, or just the whole defense, I already talked about their energy, passion, and how they did pretty much put up the brick wall that we were looking for. But I think, I don't know any one player stood out on D-line or in the front 7, but I think they just did a great job all around. I thought the linebackers were flying around, making tackles, getting in the backfield. The D-line held the line, got pushed right up the middle and into the front, and there just wasn't any breakdowns there. So I would say I noticed the D-line across the board. Other people who I don't think were necessarily standouts, but I was glad to see them do some productive things. I put Oscar Delp in that category. Again, we want to see our tight ends. Everybody who enjoyed the Brock Bowers era wants to see our tight ends be dynamic, like when we could put in those triple tight ends, when Delp was in there as the third guy sometimes, like our 3-headed running backs of the days of yore. And then you had, Brock Bowers and Darnell Washington, and we would be able to run, a scary set with 3 tight ends and just completely overwhelm defenses with what do you do about that? We seemingly have the talent for that. Oscar Delp, we've got some new young guys, but we've had Lawson Lucky, another one. We would like to think that with Delp and Lucky and any of the new guys in there, we could run those 3 tight end sets again and really scare people and make some plays. Brock Bowers don't come along. A Brock Bowers player doesn't come along every day, but I think we could get back to more production there. So seeing Oscar Delp get a long pass down the field and be a weapon, I think was really good to see. London Humphreys doesn't jump off the stat sheet with 3 catches for 8 yards. That's not going to blow you away, but one of those was a short touchdown. And so he did score a touchdown, and he was targeted. And, he's a guy that I think can do a lot of things. And I was excited about him when he transferred in last year. I don't think he got as much utility, or we didn't get as much utility out of him as I thought he would when we got him. I remember watching him rip off a touchdown when he was at Vanderbilt against us and thinking, wow, that guy's good. And he kind of reminds me of a little bit bigger, taller Lad McConkey. And so I keep kind of waiting to see that. we didn't see that on 3 catches for 8 yards, but he gets open, and he's a guy that Gunner was looking to target, obviously. I mean, the only other guy that had 3 catches was Zachariah Branch. So good to see Humphreys out there and being targeted. I think we'll see better from him or more from him. And I'm glad that he got the touchdown. I mean, it was a good possession touchdown. Finding Humphreys in the back of the end zone, there it is, nice, easy touchdown. So Chauncey Bowens had a nice day running the ball. He had 6 carries for 33 yards. It's a 5.5-yard average. He ripped off a 21-yarder. So a lot of that came on one big run, but he looked big. He looked strong. He didn't look like a guy who's going to get tackled in the backfield a lot. And, we want to see guys emerging at running back. We need more production from running back than we had last year. So I don't want to call that out as a MVP performance, but it was nice to see him show up. And that's what we're talking about here. Guys that showed up, maybe they weren't in the top group of like, hey, these guys stood out and I really noticed them. But these guys didn't go unnoticed, maybe would be how I'd say it. Colby Young had a couple catches. Nice to see him back out there. And I think he's going to be important. His length, his size, his ability to get jump balls and be a possession guy and be a touchdown maker, I think could be important. And Elias Williams, the highly regarded tight end recruit. And if you guys haven't picked this up, I know you might have heard the name, thought, oh, great, another tight end. This guy is 6'10". Darnell Washington was like 6'7", 6'8". He's 6'10". And I saw him in the spring game, but I didn't think a lot about it. He caught a pass on the sideline, kind of almost like a wheel route kind of play from Ryan Puglisi, and got in the end zone for a 23-yard touchdown, one of our longer plays of the day. And, I mean, he looked good moving. I mean, again, what can you say from one play other than the fact that, man, if he can get in the game and you can get the ball to him, and that's obviously any team is going to be mismatched against a guy like that. Further, let me go back a second. I guess I did not take the time to call out Ryan Puglisi. We're not looking to stir up a quarterback controversy, but if something happens to Gunner, and when you're going to run a guy a lot, and if you run him as much as we ran him on Saturday, and that becomes the standard for the season, then having another guy who can maybe come in, or if he gets hurt, or at least just kind of gets one of those stingers, or one of those like he's got to go out for a little bit. When you run that much, it's probably going to happen. So you wouldn't want to think that your offense just has to, sit in idle until your starter comes back. So Ryan Puglisi looked really sharp. I mean, on the arm. I mean, he whizzed some balls in there. They were right on target. He threw to some guys that were probably not really open or just barely open. And I'm sure when he got in the game, he wanted to throw. So he made the read, he made the throw, but he probably had a space the size of a duffel bag to get the ball into. And most of the time he did with a lot of zip. And, I mean, he was dynamic and impressive. And he ripped off a run for a few yards here and there. He actually finished with 2 carries for 13 yards and a long of 7. So, Ryan Puglisi didn't look, I mean, a lot of people think that the idea there was a quarterback not controversy, but real competition maybe was overhyped, that Stockton was always the clear leader. And I think after 3-4 years in the program, that's probably true. But Ryan Puglisi in short action yesterday, or on Saturday, looked like a guy who could be a quarterback for the University of Georgia and make some plays. I was definitely impressed. And I feel better knowing that if something happens to Gunner, I feel like there's a guy who can at least come in for a series or two, and we don't have to just, play defense and hope we can get to the end of the game or get back to where Gunner can come back. So Drew Miller also, call him out. Thorson is not ready. Thorson can kick. He is punting, and people saw him warming up on the sideline. But they say they're probably just not comfortable with him having to tackle. And if you punt the ball, you might have to be the tackler, which is actually how he got hurt. So they're not ready to have him tackle people yet, but he is back and kicking the ball. So Drew Miller took over the punting. We actually had 2 returns against us. I mean, Thorson went like most of the year without giving up a return, and because not only does he get the distance, but he gets the height. And so with our speed and talent on special teams, people just say, no, thanks. There's nowhere to go. Miller got the ball off, though. He didn't have any problems. He didn't get blocked, and he averaged 48 yards a punt on 6 punts. Way too many punts for this game. He pinned 2 inside the 20. He had a long of 54, and it's nice to know that if Thorson is not completely healthy or has a relapse or something like that, we have the kind of luxury of a guy who can average 48 yards per punt back there ready to kick. Maybe not with the kind of hang time that Thorson has, but still overall very impressive. So let me just scan through my notes, the show notes that I put together here to say red zone. I guess I also point out we were in the red zone 4 times and we had 4 touchdowns. Can't do better than that. So good for us. We've had some red zone trouble in the past. So we are glad to see that. Just scanning through. Give me 1 second. I mentioned neither team had a sack, so that's a little bit disappointing. Neither team had a turnover. We didn't turn the ball over, which is great, but we didn't create any turnovers. And I know Kirby believes in creating turnovers. So I think there'll be some disappointment from the coaching staff that we didn't create a turnover, and I don't think we got that close. A couple other guys that I did notice on defense go into the call out on defense. Raylan Wilson had a nice game. Gabe Harris, who I previously misidentified in a different podcast as transferring to Missouri, but he did not. He's still with us, and he had a couple tackles for loss. And KJ Bolden had the block punt and a pass defended, and he really looked great. We've always been our last year and this year, he's just continues his rise as one of the next great defensive backfield players at Georgia. So we're happy to see that. We talked about how the game flowed. We had consistent time of possession. We moved the ball throughout the game. We had drives throughout the game. We scored throughout the game. We've highlighted our players. We've kind of covered a lot of the key. I'm just looking through the show notes here to say, is there anything else really important? Overall, I think, again, if I'm grading the team, and I'm not sure I usually get into 1 out of 10s or B pluses or A minus. I don't know if that's the way to look at it, but I think it was satisfying. It was great to see the team back out on the field. It's great to see a beautiful day at Sanford Stadium, see the stadium full of people at least for a few minutes, to see the pregame rituals and all the good stuff, the calling of the dogs, Herschel calling the dogs. And Herschel, let's just give a shout out to Herschel. I know some people, maybe there's a little controversy about Herschel from his Senate run, this, that, and the other. But look, Herschel Walker is one of the greatest college football players to ever live. We are lucky and proud to have him as part of our football history. And outside of politics, he's always been a good guy in the community. He's always given back to the team. And it was important to him to, all these years later, he recently completed his degree, which he left early, obviously, for the pros. Didn't complete his degree. Highest honor that the university bestows is the Circle of Honor. But Circle of Honor does require that you are a graduate of the university. And Circle of Honor doesn't have to be athletics. It can be all kinds of things. Significant high-level contribution to the university. Herschel obviously has done that in a lot of different ways. But he did complete his degree. I think he had a lot of fun doing it. And now he was inducted into the Circle of Honor this year, and he was recognized for that and got to do the calling of the dogs. So wonderful to see Herschel out there, wonderful for him to be recognized for his accomplishments, and great to see a lot of the recent pros, new guys who are in the pros this year, but haven't started their pro season yet after finishing training camp and preseason. Great to see them on the sideline. Other guys were back to watch the game. It's always great to have that. I think it makes a great impression for the young players that are still there, recruits that are looking to see how energetic Bulldogs are about the Bulldog program. So those are other good things to say about this last Saturday. As we get into tomorrow, by the time we have tomorrow's podcast, we'll probably have new rankings coming out. We can talk a little bit more about what happened in the other SEC teams and around the nation, how our perception is going to change or not change in this game. We'll see some of that with the rankings when they're out by tomorrow, and we'll get a chance to talk about that. And so that's what we'll look forward to on Tuesday. We'll take a look at the big picture, see where we stand nationally, see where the SEC looks like. We'll kind of reshuffle the deck a little bit now that preseason's over, talking season's over, and we have actual games and performances to take a look at. There's obviously going to be a lot of overreactions to what happened with Arch Manning, to what happened, maybe not an overreaction to what happened with Alabama. We'll talk about that. We'll look at some of the other teams and and nationally. I think probably an overreaction about what happened with Ohio State winning the game. And, I'll just throw a teaser out there. One of the things that really struck me yesterday is what happened to offense. For a last 4, 5, 6 years in college football, offense has been dominating. Everybody wants to see the offense, and they have been dominating. None of the big matchups yesterday or over the weekend had any offense to speak of. LSU Clemson, 17-10 game. Texas Ohio State, 14-7 game. Even Miami, Notre Dame last night, 27-24. A little more offense than the others, but still neither team had over 400 yards of offense. Just a whole bunch of matchups out there where you just didn't see a ton of offense. So we'll get into that and talk about that a little bit. But that was my first impression, was all these big games and big matchups that people were looking for were largely low-scoring, old-style defensive shootouts almost. But not necessarily because of the defenses. I mean, I watched the Texas Ohio State game because it was before ours, and neither of those teams looked very good, to be honest. I mean, they looked solid, and they did what they should have been doing on defense, but neither team was, you weren't seeing like old school slobber knocking defenses that just couldn't be moved on. You were seeing offenses that were really bad for both teams, and the hype was on Arch coming in, and it's going to be on how he didn't perform after this game. But, Ohio State, they didn't even have, not only did they not even have 300 yards offense, they didn't even have 250 yards offense. I think they had about 216 yards offense or something like that. So they won the game. Kudos to them. And I know there's going to be a lot of Big Ten crowing. 2 national championships now. They beat the SEC's number 1 team. We can talk about whether Texas should have been number 1. I made some comments about, comparing Texas and, with Arch and Gunner Stockton and making some comparisons in previous podcasts. We'll get back to that a little bit and talk about, those comparisons tomorrow and the next day. But, just a couple teasers of things we'll talk about. But I do think I think that, look out for the overhype from the Big Ten and from Ohio State. I mean, they won the game, and you got to tip their hat, and they did. Texas, and some of that was definitely the Ohio State defense, but neither of those teams looked like the number 1 team in the country, really, when you talk about a complete team. And maybe people just don't usually this time of year. We'll talk about it some more tomorrow. But for now, this has been your recap on Saturday game day, our first game day of the year. So game week 1 is in the books. We are now in game week 2. So thank you so much for joining us. I'm glad you were here, and I look forward to having you back tomorrow as we take a look at where we stand and where everybody else stands and what does it all mean, what happened this last weekend, especially as it relates to Georgia. Thanks again, and as always, go Dogs.